Humanity's first Titan-class warship showed up, and panic broke out through Council. The blinding flash of a 22-ship kinetic barrage whited out the forward tracking optics of the command bridge. The glare held for 4 full seconds, melting the localized shield grids of the perimeter sensors before the automated filters could adjust. Fleet Commander Solar Corrin slammed her 6-fingered hand onto the baseline console, her pale golden irises narrowing as she waited for the radiation data to settle. The tracking system hummed under the load, its external cooling vents pulsing with the heavy sulfur tang of recycled liquid. On the visual main grid, the unindexed 11-kilometer human Vanguard vessel remained perfectly frozen in the center of the blast radius. The black alloy plates of its swept hull showed no structural tears, no system drops, and no signs of impact at all. The running lights across its tiered flank kept their city-like rhythm, pulsing calmly against the raw smoke of the explosion. Panic broke out through the Council bridge as 3 secondary stations began reporting total sensory overmatch. Would you have stood your ground against an alliance that thick, or would you have waited for a sign because the sign just arrived? Keep listening. 2 hours earlier, the tactical feed had offered no such miracles. Corrin stood by the forward view platform of the flagship, turning a scratched copper signet ring around her finger as she watched the terraced green plains of Oasis sub-IV burn under low-orbit shelling. The agricultural colony had filed every line of boundary paperwork with the High Tribunal, yet the treaties had arrived too late to shield them. A heavy obsidian warship from the Zulkiri Collective adjusted its trajectory on the primary interface, its thermal batteries throwing up heat columns through the thin atmosphere. Warlord Jaexul appeared on the encrypted communication screen, his 9-foot armored exoskeleton reflecting the harsh red glow of his command deck. His biological respiratory vents puffed with sulfur fumes as he looked down at the smaller Concorde ships. "Your laws exist exclusively on parchment," Jaexul said, his remaining secondary mandibles twitching as he spat into the transmission grid. "Our borders are written in high-yield plasma. Withdraw your 9 hulls while the corridor remains open." Corrin tightened her secondary jaw hinge, her hand resting flat on the communication interface. "The High Council will treat any further strike on these 40,000 colonists as an open declaration of total regional war. Stand down your vessels." Jaexul laughed, the sound low and wet through the bridge speakers, and severed the signal line before her tactical officer could log the telemetry. The communication screen went completely dark. Concorde Doctrine required immediate multi-committee authorization before the flagship could charge its sublight kinetic batteries, leaving the small defensive line trapped in tactical inertia. The invaders built their ships like barricades, heavy and simple, designed to take a punch until there was nothing left to strike. They knew the peacekeepers would deliberate until the soil was entirely harvested. "Commander," Surveyor Thuron said, his fingers tapping a rapid diagnostic sequence into his slate. "The outer slipwell threshold is breaking. I have a mass signature tracking into the sector at speeds that defy our conventional sublight caps." Corrin stepped toward the primary tracking terminal, her golden eyes tracking a massive distortion grid that rippled across the outer system boundary. The incoming energy pattern did not correspond to any known drive signature in the galactic registry, yet the physical mass displacement was scaling past all established framework limits. The surrounding starfields seemed to warp around the visual feed as the entity terminated its faster-than-light transit. A long, dark, swept blade of alloy materialized at the perimeter, its aft drive units shedding transit energy in a dull, persistent glow. Each individual propulsion engine was larger than 3 Concorde destroyers stacked together. It was 11 kilometers from bow to stern. The entire bridge crew dropped their diagnostic tools as the scale resolved itself from raw data into a physical shadow. No one spoke. The flagship ventilation system clicked into a lower cycle, leaving only the sound of Corrin's ring knocking against the command rail. The largest vessel in the radar arsenal was a command carrier that measured barely over a kilometer, a frame that now looked like decoration placed beside a mountain. Physics has iron laws regarding mass and propulsion, but the incoming vessel was treating those laws like an administrative suggestion. The 6 Raider Vanguard ships holding the perimeter abandoned their sealing pattern, turning their forward batteries away from the colony to face the unknown Titan. They broke their defensive cluster, shifting into a broad probe spread to get a clear sensor resolution on the target. Corrin watched the human vessel maintain absolute stillness as the hostile war vessels advanced. It did not arm its dorsal arrays. It did not launch interceptors. It simply waited, entirely comfortable inside the center of 22 weapons grids. "Thuron," Corrin said, her voice dropping into a clipped, measured tempo. "Extract everything from the deeper survey archives. Look for unverified exploration logs beyond the charted sectors. Someone must have crossed this profile before." Thuron bypassed 3 security locks on the pre-council data bins, his hands steady as he pulled a degraded 300-year-old surveyor report from a Krellian exploration run. Corrin read the text on her secondary display. An ancient captain had recorded a moving structure of incomprehensible scale drifting through the unmapped dark before turning his ship around to go home. The archive had been dismissed by 3 separate committees as unverified testimony. They had been out there for 3 centuries, watching the borders shift from the deep cold while the council filed reports. The 6 Raider craft closed the distance to 300 kilometers and fired a controlled kinetic ranging shot directly into the forward flank of the Titan. The projectile crossed the vacuum in a fraction of a second, striking the dark alloy plates with enough force to crack a standard orbital platform. The human hull absorbed the impact like dust. The running lights did not flicker, the defense grids did not flare, and no debris broke away from the impact site. The massive vessel did not even reconfigure its lateral drift. A direct tight beam signal overrode the flagship's primary frequency, filling the bridge with a calm, unhurried voice that carried no trace of static or translation delay. It belonged to a biological creature that spoke standard galactic speech with perfect, practiced rhythm. "That was not necessary," the voice said, the tone steady and entirely unafraid. "This is Commander Rael Sorin of the United World Ship Dominion of Reach. We are aware of the situation on the surface. We are here to observe, and we ask that all parties hold their current positions. We will be in contact shortly." Jaexul did not answer the transmission. The Raider fleet reconfigured its geometry within 9 minutes, drawing all 22 warships into a tight combat cluster around their command carrier. Energy signatures flared across their forward hulls as every weapon system went active simultaneously. They were going to fire before the Titan finished its communication cycle. Corrin gripped the command rail, watching the tactical display flash with critical threat alerts as the Raiders prepared their primary salvo. "We are out of position," Tactical Officer Valen said, wiping a speck of oil off his secondary command slate with a quick, nervous motion. "If that battery misses the Titan, the residual thermal wash will take out our secondary shield grid." The Raider fleet discharged everything at once. Kinetic slugs, thermal beams, and missile salvos crossed the gap together, colliding against the human hull in a unified event that turned the visual screens into a wall of solid white. Corrin held her breath as the bridge display auto-compensated for the light. When the glare cleared, the Dominion of Reach remained precisely where it had stood, completely unblemished by the fire of an entire regional fleet. Then the human Vanguard vessel moved. The speed was wrong for an 11-kilometer structure, its swept hull slicing through the vacuum with a smooth lateral acceleration that left the Raider targeting computers tracking empty space. The Titan swept across the Raider formation in a long, deliberate arc, its automated rail drivers firing in microsecond intervals. It did not target the weapon systems or the crew quarters. It struck the port and starboard drive modules with absolute precision. 22 warships lurched sideways in rapid sequence as their thrust balance collapsed. No hulls breached, no reactors exploded, and no casualties appeared on Corrin's biometric tracking feed. The Raider fleet was simply grounded, their propulsion lines dead, left to drift like iron blocks in the low orbit of Oasis sub-IV. "We spent 3 centuries drafting protocols for a war they ended in 20 seconds with an automated steering adjustment." "Commander," Thuron said, his voice dropping into a whisper as his terminal registered a massive chain of secondary FTL transit blooms at the system perimeter. we have more contacts. 14 additional mass signatures have just entered the sector. The new human vessels arranged themselves in a wide crescent formation across the outer slipwell, completely sealing every egress vector from the system. Hulls ranging from 8 to 16 kilometers black out the stars, ensuring that nothing could leave the sector without permission. A fleet, a hidden fleet, a fleet built to change the galaxy forever. They did not advance on the drifting raiders. They simply stood as an announcement, a statement of unyielding civilizational presence that made the entire Concord framework look tiny. Admiral Ossel, Soren's voice returned over the direct flagship link, mild and conversational. The raider fleet is immobilized. We are sending down our logistical transports to begin relief operations on the surface, and we would welcome peacekeeper coordination on the ground. Our medical teams are ready. Corin looked down at her console, her hands releasing their tight grip on the metal rail. The survival of Oasis Sub-IV was no longer a matter of committee debate. Vayek, open an encrypted priority channel to Council High Command. Tell the Counselor to clear his schedule for the next several cycles. The relief operations took 33 hours of continuous coordination. Human transports descended from the Titan's launch bays in perfect lines, offloading medical assets prepared for a population 3 times the size of the colony. Corin sat inside the modest briefing room of the Dominion of Reach on the second morning, watching Warlord Jaexul sign the total withdrawal charter with a physical marker on paper. The raider commander looked like a man trying to read a map whose features had completely dissolved overnight. His ships were already being fitted with temporary drive parts by human engineering crews, just enough to let them crawl back to their original borders. Soren set a small container of warm oolong tea in front of Corin after the raider delegation had departed, his dark eyes showing a slight touch of amusement as he watched her inspect the leaf sediment. There will be fear when the High Council reads my report, Corin said, taking a short sip of the bitter liquid. They will see 49 of these Titan-class vessels in your records and call humanity an existential threat to the peace. We knew they would, Soren said, folding his hands across the table. That is why we stayed in the dark for 300 years. We did not want to arrive with only weapons. We wanted to arrive with a record of what we do when the innocent are dying. Corin set her cup down, her scratched copper ring clicking against the polished composite table. She looked through the viewing port at the 14 distant shapes holding the perimeter line, their hulls dark against the stellar background. Her hand rested on the command console, the scratched copper loop gleaming under the lights as a permanent seal on an entirely rewritten stellar map. The charts are obsolete. Erase the borders because the dark between our stars just woke up. She boarded her shuttle 40 minutes later, leaving the Dominion of Reach floating at the center of the sector. Through the view screen of her transport, the 11-kilometer dark hull sat perfectly still in the starlight.